Larry is trying to join.
Okay, great.
Okay, we'll just give it a minute.
I think that's what working on it means.
Okay. Well, I guess while he's doing that, I will go ahead and call the regular bi-monthly meeting of the Marin Municipal Water District Board of Directors to order. And our first agenda item is to call the roll.
Sure. Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Russell. I see him.
Here.
Director Schmidt
Here.
and President Kohler.
Here. Our next item is to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Great, then let's have the roll call vote, please.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Yes, aye.
Director Schmidt.
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, we are now going to close the open meeting and convene to close session.
Thank you.
Do we have?
You may start.
Okay, great. We are reconvening after the closed session with no reportable action. It is now the time for members of the public to comment on any item that is not listed on the agenda. Terry, do we have any public comments?
We might, Mr. Roger Roberts. Oh, we do have two. Mr. Roberts?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can.
I've just come from the Marin Conservation League board meeting tonight. And the board has approved an action item in support of the pipeline. And I wanted you to know that, and I won't read the whole letter to you. You're going to be receiving that by email and snail mail probably tomorrow. But let me just read the opening preamble and point number 1 in our letter. In response to historic statewide drought conditions and uncertainties about future rainfall, the Marin Conservation League appreciates the district's efforts to evaluate and inform the public about alternatives for supplemental water supply. Due to the effects of climate change, it is prudent that the Water District diversifies its portfolio to ensure a resilient water supply for the public it serves. We recommend the following. 1, intertie pipeline. Proceed with planning, permitting, and construction of the intertie pipeline over the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge connecting to East Bay Mud, with continued strong emphasis towards implementation of ongoing conservation measures. And we go in greater detail on that aspect. But I wanted you to know that the Marin Conservation League fully supports your pursuit of the pipeline.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roger, and appreciate the support for ongoing water use efficiency as well.
Yep.
Next speaker is Mr. Rick Adler.
Yes, thank you. I think the pipeline is a waste of money. And because the drought here extends from Mexico to British Columbia and east to the Rocky Mountains, and you're not going to find any water at the end of the pipeline to tap into when we really need it. I think we should invest the money in our own renewable sources of new water. One is catching the fog that rolls in over the Marin Hills every day. There's a lot of water in that fog, and it can be easily caught and let gravity flow down to tanks and used. The other is desalinization through solar energy. Instead of doing the complicated high pressure reverse osmosis, you can use the solar electric energy to heat the water, evaporate all the water out, distill it into fresh, pure water, and sell the salt. You don't have to put anything back into the bay. Solar energy is cheapest, least expensive, most reliable source of energy on the planet right now. And we could have a solid state, simple solution to supplement water, because what you consider the drought is not the drought, it's the new normal. It's the climate change. And there'll be wet years, just enough wet years to convince you that you don't have to actually get new sources of water. But you're going to run a deficit, because if you have half amount of the rain one year, you need more than 1.5 times the rain the following year to make it up. You run a deficit, you're drawing the bank down. And we're not going to have that sort of thing. I guess I run out of time, but I would love to be able to explain to you how you can catch the bog and distill the water, but hopefully you'll contact me and I'll tell you all about it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
There are no further speakers.
Okay. That brings us to directors and general managers announcements. Any directors announcements tonight?
I have one.
Okay.
These marathon meetings are getting my attention. And to that end, with respect to the drought and for the period of the intensity of the meetings that we're experiencing, I think we should be scheduling a board meeting for every Tuesday and then decide if we need it or not. And if we don't need it, we don't have it. If we need it, we have it. I'd also like to see us consider flipping our board meetings over and getting the little items out of the way first. So like on this board packet, we have approval of meter reader. I think we should get those items done and get the people on their way that have those items of their attention, and then get into the long-winded ones that have all of the likelihood of discussion.
Okay. It's not that I disagree with anything you're saying, Larry, but that's not an agendized item, so I don't think we can engage. It sounds like we might want to be agendizing that for another meeting. Any other board announcements? Okay, Ben, do you have any general managers announcements?
I do, President Kohler. As the board may recall, last November, so almost a year ago, you authorized staff to execute a professional service agreement with Tetra Tech to complete a local hazard mitigation plan. So the draft report is now complete, and in accordance with FEMA's requirements, the public has 2 weeks to comment on the draft report, which can be found on our website under Education and Outreach, subsection Emergency Response. Following the public comment period, the next steps will be sending a draft of the report to Cal OES and FEMA for review and their comments, followed by board approval. We're targeting November, December. And as a reminder, this has been quite an effort. And once it's complete, it will allow us to be eligible for FEMA hazard mitigation grants, and which is quite a pool of resources that we're looking forward to availing ourselves of. That's all I have.
Great. That sounds like a good place for us to be. Okay, that brings us to our consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
I need a second.
Second.
Do we have any board comment on this item? Do we have any public comment on this item, Terry?
There are none I'm sorry, actually there is one. Andrew McCullough.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Andrew McCullough. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and would you mind confirming that ordinance 454 is in fact on the consent calendar? So I'm raising my hand at the right time.
It's not.
It's
No.
a public
No.
hearing.
Right.
We have a public hearing.
We're getting to that.
Thank you. Then I'll hold off. I apologize.
No problem. It's always good to ask. All right, so we're looking for a vote on the approval of the consent calendar.
Sure, but before I do that, I just want to make sure that the board is okay with the revised minutes that I sent earlier.
Yes?
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt. Director Schmidt, oh, sorry, and President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to the regular calendar. Item 7, the drought update. This is an information item. So this is not an action item. That will be coming in the next item, which is the adoption of the ordinance.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Lucy Croy, Water Quality Manager. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I'll note before we start tonight, we're going to give an update on the efforts going into drought response over the past couple of weeks. And there are a number of other drought-related items on the agenda tonight. So our focus for this presentation is going to be a little bit more streamlined than we usually do to allow more time for those detailed presentations afterwards on the defining water use limits and additional potential water use restrictions. So tonight we'll start off with the very typical structure. So starting off with water supply and water use, give an update on the drought activities over the past couple of weeks, move into an update on communication and outreach, and finish off with an update on conservation over the past couple of weeks. So starting off with water supply, going into mid to late September, our total reservoir storage shown right here is around 28,000 acre feet as of today. So that's just over 35% of our total capacity. Normally we would be around 56,000 acre feet, so we're 50% of normal. And these really are quite historic times for us. We did receive just under 1/10 of an inch of rain this weekend, but didn't see much impact from that, unfortunately. Then moving into an update on water use. Over the past couple of weeks, we've seen our average stay around 21.5 million gallons per day. So you can see it's right around here. And it's remained really relatively steady over the summer months with a little bit of a decline over the last couple of weeks. This is really a 27% weekly reduction compared to our baseline, our 3-year average, 2018 to 2020. And really, we've been able to see that there's quite a steadiness over the summer months, where usually we would see quite a peak. And this has also been around a 22% total conservation since May 1st, when the drought emergency was declared. Going into October and November, we typically see demand start to drop. So it'll be good to see if we can hold at conservation levels where they currently are, or really see them increase. So moving into projected reservoir storage, we started the year around 45,000 acre feet, and we now are down around 28,000 acre feet, as I mentioned. Looking ahead, if we were to receive 25% or around that range of rainfall runoff, given historical averages, that's the lower bracket down here in the orange dashed line, and up above the green dashed line showing our average rainfall runoff around 45,000 acre feet if we were next December. The solid line are showing the impact of 40% conservation savings. So in the last slide, I showed you that we've been able to achieve around 27% this past couple of weeks. So if we're able to move that up to 40% on an annual basis, that's where you would see the savings right here. So the district has been, recognizing these projections. We've been considering emergency drought alternatives, and went into a deeper dive at the last operations meeting on Friday, closely tying into the desalination and water transfers projects shown here. And really tonight, the focus is going to be on conservation and doing a deeper dive into conservation moving ahead. So the statewide drought that we are experiencing is, of course, not ours alone. There are other utilities and customers outside of our service area that are impacted. And we've had requests already come in from Inverness Public Utilities District with a conceptual approach for regional benefits, as well as another request from the County of Marin for water supply needs that are in West Marin. And there will be a further discussion at the Finance Committee meeting this upcoming Thursday. So moving into an update on drought activities. As I've mentioned in the last few presentations, we started our recycled water fill station in mid-August. We got it open, and we've really seen the community come out very excited to have it out there. And we've been operating during the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 a.m. to 2. And listening to our customers, we're opening up this coming Saturday. So Saturday, September 25th, and we're going to open up from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And see if there's quite a bit of uptick in new customers that are able to make it out during those hours rather than during the week. And then, just an update on the number of customers we are seeing. So we've had 320 individual customers sign up at this point. And that's, to put that in perspective, that is actually just about the number of individual services that we have on our recycled water infrastructure system right now. So it's comparable. And those 320 customers have made over 1,400 visits to this recycled water fill station, picking up over 150,000 gallons of water. So another program that we've been running is our Waterways program, really focusing on educating our customers about the water use restrictions that are in place and helping them understand why they are in place. Shown on this map are some of the door tags that we've been able to issue mainly through patrols. So we have a programmatic approach of really approaching this, ensuring the customers understand what the restrictions are and really issuing first notices or warnings to make sure they understand, what are the restrictions, what days, and then if there are repetitive over irrigation or water waste in the community, then we follow up with second warning.
Lucy, can I just ask you quickly, are these 2,400 tags, are they going primarily to high water users in tier 4 and tier 3?
That's a good question. We haven't done that analysis yet. Right now, it's a good one that we will follow up on. Primarily what we've done is what I'm showing, kind of one of the tools we've been using is just to look, we have these systematic routes to go through the communities. And so what you're seeing are some of the hot spots that we've noticed. And so in addition to our routine patrols, also focusing in on some of the hot spots. But that's a great idea to also just, see if we can correlate if it's happening with high users or if it's just within the community and making sure they understand what the restrictions are.
Is there any indication by color here of people who have had repeat visits or notices, or is it just sheer numbers of tags, whether it's repeat or single?
So this is showing just sheer numbers, but I can relay that so far we've seen a pretty small amount of second notices. So I believe the number is lower than 10%. So pretty good compliance so far, or they're starting to understand what the restrictions are once we're able to communicate with the customer.
That's great. That's great to know.
So in addition to our routine patrols, we're also responding to Waterways reports from the community actively. So as we get online reports through our online portal or through our Waterways hotline or emails, we're able to respond during the day and go out and see if we can confirm that water waste and make sure that we follow up. And the response so far has been relatively understanding and positive. I will convey that. This is just one example of one of the leaks that have been found on the consumer side and how that has been passed off to our staff. So we're seeing, a mixed bag, but overall people are really, appreciate the effort and the understanding of the drought and trying to minimize water waste. So I will now pass off to Emma, and she will give an update on outreach and communications.
Thank you, Lucy. Good evening, everyone. Emma Detweiler, Acting Communications and Public Affairs Manager. Next slide, please, Lucy. So the first item that I would like to cover tonight are the upcoming drought webinars, or what we're calling community conversations on all things drought. The first will be held on Monday, October 11th, and the second on Thursday, October 21st. And both will be held from 5 to 7 p.m. to try to accommodate most folks' work schedules. So both of these webinars will provide an update on our water supply status. One of the webinars will be more focused on conservation tips, rebates, and incentives. And the other will be focused on our drought response and the supplemental water supply projects that the board has been considering to augment our supply. Really, the intent with these is to provide ample time for our customers to interact with staff and really ask any questions that they have. So the presentations will be about 20 minutes, and then the rest of the time will be open floor for the community to engage with us and ask their questions, and really just to hear from the district on how we're responding to the drought and what we have been working on these past months. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share two new outreach material items that have been produced. The first is a new yard sign that we've created to be available for customers that are participating in our turf replacement program. So if they've removed their lawns and their landscaping has not been replanted, they can put this sign in their yard to let their neighbors know, let the community know that they are participating in the program, that they're doing their part to help out during the drought. Sending them back to our website for additional information. These will also be available at our office, so anyone interested can pick one up to place in their yard. They'll be available next week. The second item, slide back, thank you, Lucy. So the second item that we created is this water savings potential list. This was really intended to not only show the water savings that are possible by upgrading to more efficient fixtures, but also to give people an idea of how much water, indoor water use fixtures use. So then we're looking at getting to closer to that 55-gallon target for indoor water use per person or lower. This would serve as a guide to help people understand how to get there. Next slide, please. So finally, looking ahead here, we are very close to launching a new page on our website that would be all things drought response. So this would be a landing page that would really have the latest information, all of the details available on the water supply projects that we're pursuing. This would be in addition to our marinwater.org/conserve page, and would just serve as another resource for our customers and interested stakeholders to find out what the district is doing to address the drought. We are also continuing to seek out and book community presentations. We are just about at 60 presentations. I think next week we will get there. So we're offering up community presentations. People can sign up or request one on our website. So we're always open to have staff go and present to community groups. And lastly, we wanted to really highlight the fact that there's a lot of information about our drought response, just general questions about conservation and saving water, questions about our rebates program. So we've put that all together in one place on our website. The screenshot here on the right is a current look at our website on a mobile device, and you can see it's really one of the first things that people arrive at. And to further highlight the availability of these FAQs and all of the great resources on our website, we plan to feature an FAQ Friday, social media push, where every Friday we would take some of the questions that we're seeing in the comments, or just have received input from our customers that it's a topic they'd like to learn more about. And we'll be featuring that weekly in addition to the content that we push out throughout the week. So this is just a look at some of the things that we're working on. I'm happy to take questions, but if there are none, I will pass this to Carrie Pollard, who is our water efficiency manager.
Just a quick one. Can you go back, Emma, a couple slides to the, yeah, if you could go back one more. Yeah, right there. The water savings potential, is that all indoor? I think people would be really interested. I think this is great. I think one question I would have is, you know, our biggest opportunity is outside, right? We really want people to be taking advantage of that $3 a square foot turf change out, and, you know, the ratio controllers and the flume meters. I mean, so are you thinking about doing this for outdoor water use as well? Because I think we'd see a much bigger bang for the buck.
Yes, so we were planning actually to print on the reverse some outdoor water use figures. We had just created this so far, but that's definitely something that we were considering, whether they're separate documents or they're front and back, still to be determined, but that's definitely something we're considering.
Okay, well, I think just because that's where the opportunity to save is so much greater, I would, if we can, I know there's, everything's a priority, but if we can make it a priority, I think it'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great
I
presentation.
think that's a great, yeah, great presentation, Emma, and a great idea, Cynthia. I'd also like to thank and congratulate you, Emma, today on your press interview about desal. I thought it went very well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Emma. So I have the next section, the conservation update. Next slide. So of course, we continue to track our program participation. So we have our September numbers here. Worth noting are a couple of items. One is that we are seeing, you know, clearly a decline in September participation to date for our turf removal program. And as noted, that is our biggest opportunity to save. Comm staff went through outreach and social media posts and kind of what we were doing in the prior months to get a better idea of you know, what was different. And we'll start to see some boosts, social media boost postings in the next coming days. And then potentially an additional e-news article as well. So we do continue to track what the outreach campaigns are, you know, where we're targeting, what we're hitting, and in turn, what's the level of participation we're seeing. And so we hope to boost that when we get to the end of the month. I'll also note that we have some revised monthly targets, recognizing you know, board input on the need to have higher targets for a number of our items. So clothes washers, rain barrels, pool covers, hot water research systems, and gray water incentives have all been increased based on board comment. So we continue to track these. Next slide. A bit of additional information. So for our turf program, we do also track, one of our metrics is average applications per day. As noted, we are seeing a decline this month, and this is really us being strategic, looking at this strategically about where we should be focusing communications to drive participation in that program. So this is working on being addressed as once we saw these numbers, so we're putting this together. So we look forward to seeing those increase throughout the rest of the month. Looking at our high water users, so the survey is complete. It actually finished up on Friday, and the findings are currently being compiled. We want to immediately turn to the focus group and continue to refine the findings to determine what will motivate these high water users and what methods we need to kind of promote to increase participation within our programs, or perhaps not participation, but just further reductions in demands from these higher users. So these are our tier 3 and tier 4 users. We look forward to, we'll either have a memo to the board or hopefully a presentation at one of our board meetings. We know they're quite packed, so we have to find a time that we can get this information in front of you, but I think you'll all appreciate hearing some of the key takeaways from the survey and then in turn the focus group.
No, I agree that will be interesting. Can you give us, just since we are at a board meeting now, can you give us kind of just really ballpark, like how much are the high water users using compared to, you know, tier 1?
I'm going to say I did not prepare that, so okay. I think that'll be something we can bring back. I don't want to be too far out of the ballpark. So, but I appreciate really the interest.
I think that'd be really useful information when you present this to, you know, because I think it makes a difference if they're at a completely different level of consumption. I remember hearing a presentation from you a couple of months ago that was a little shocking. Like over 1,000 gallons of water per person per day. Whereas our tier 1 people are, closer to 50, 55.
In our next presentation, we do have a breakdown of use within each tier, which you could probably kind of glean a bit of that off of. But finally, the Grey Water webinar is, we have a Grey Water webinar scheduled later this week on the 23rd at 5 o'clock. And if folks are interested, they can register for that on our website at marinewater.org/rebates. Next slide. And then, of course, next step, we continue to refine and enhance and focus on our conservation efforts along with all of our other operational water supply projects. We continue to monitor and report out to the board status every 2 weeks. And so, sometimes it feels like slow goings, but we are, trying to keep conservation front and center in our customers' mind while we pursue additional water supply projects. With that, if there's any additional questions from the board, we'd be happy to take them.
I have one. Are you planning to record that webinar?
It already is posted and recorded. That's a great question. We just find that some folks really want to engage and attend and have someone there to answer their questions. And so that's why we brought them back. We actually stopped for the last 3 months. We hadn't had any live webinars because of the recording. And I think we need to continue offering them as an option as well.
I'm all
in
for
person,
that,
in person of Zoom.
Sure, but why not record them and then post them on the webpage?
We do. We have it recorded
Oh, okay,
and posted.
okay,
Mhm.
okay.
But participation just dropped off from the kit, taking our incentives when we weren't actually offering them via Zoom in person.
Yeah. I'll just note that I am concerned about, and again, I don't think this is a reflection of staff, but I am concerned about the drop off. It sounds like the early adopters have acted, and now the question is, how do we really reach the next level of folks? Because we do need to get to that 40% overall, not individually. So yeah, so I think we need to really hear from staff about what that looks like going forward. Any other board comments on this item before I go to public comment?
Yeah, I want to ask, I know that we've talked in the past about conversations with Sonoma Water Agency about looking at potential water supplies that could help us make it through the dry year that the worst case, or a worst case scenario coming in the coming summer and through the dry winter. And I'm wondering, Ben, one of the things that I'm curious about is the extent to which I know we've been talking with Sonoma about any potential water supplies that they might be able to make available. And one of the things that I wanted to ask about is I'm aware that we're doing an assessment of long-term water supply reliability, looking at a regional perspective with Sonoma Water Agency and others. And if I'm correct in that, about that assessment, maybe you could tell us where that assessment process is at and whether there's something as part of the effort that's ongoing, possibly that could shed some light about some strategies or tools or water supply options that might help us, again, address some of our water supply needs in a dry year scenario.
Yeah, so I'd say like a lot of our water supply efforts, there's a short-term and long-term, and there may not be a lot of overlap in terms of Sonoma. Long-term, they are doing the resiliency study with all the contractors, and we're engaged. I think the speed is picking up, particularly where many of us are interested on groundwater storage and retrieval. But that is certainly a long-term, and it's just really not in the cards for that to play out and give us some relief during this drought, given the time it would take to develop that effort. The concept of the potential for additional winter water use was one that was presented to us, and their staff did analysis, and the indications were that there could be some additional water in an average and more water in a wet year. Of course, our planning scenario is in the case of a dry year, and what they found is there's not much water available in a dry year. And the year they actually ran the analysis Paul would know, it might have been 2015 maybe.
Water year 2014. Water year.
2014. They used that and there was 1,000 acre feet available in just as a representative dry year. There was a meeting yesterday with Sonoma Water and they were talking about the projections for Lake Sonoma to go below 100,000 acre feet, which it results in a trigger for further reduction. So to move from 20% curtailment to 30% curtailment. So in a way, it's kind of unfortunately going the wrong direction, but the Russian River system is fairly strained right now, as we all know. And there was interest on the call, I understand, I wasn't on the call, that if there is available additional water, there's interest from other contractors. So we would, get some portion, but likely not all of it. So I guess at this point, we're continuing to engage with them. And I do believe they're, brainstorming and looking at different analysis, but so far, there hasn't been anything produced just due to the fact of the drought and where they are.
Thank you for that. It's really helpful. I mean, I think that that analysis, has bearing as we, and I wish it was further along, obviously, that we all do, because the information from it could really help us to identify what really are the most cost-effective ways to ensure we have a resilient, climate resilient, and drought resilient water supply going forward. Do you know what the time frame is for completing that resiliency analysis?
It's probably out there, but I don't know, Paul, do you have a feel for a date particularly? I think they're trying to accelerate the groundwater storage piece.
They are. They're trying to move forward the ASR piece. I believe, I want to say it's at least a year out, was what I was understanding.
I'm just mindful that we have a really long agenda tonight. I don't mean to cut you off, Monty, but does it make sense to talk about it more when we get to the ordinance? Or
I have one question on this subject, and I didn't hear anything in there about recycled water. I assume that's because, like Sonoma, that's a long-term solution at best. Other than, of course, the come and pick it up stations, which I think are a great idea. And I've got a number of people in the public give high praise for that process. They like it very much. And I know at our last board meeting, we approved a go forward study on recycled water out to the Peacock Gap area. Any possibilities there to squeeze more out of recycled water to do in any way, or is that just pretty much all on the long-term solution shelf?
I believe those are really long-term opportunities to pursue some grant funding, and even the challenges, given the nature of our service area, we don't have big targets that will really be a game changer, in the near term or long term. I mean, we're going to continue to do what we've always done and pursue recycling. It's the right thing. It's the right use of water for irrigation, but there's really nothing there, very unfortunately, in context in terms of the drought relief. Okay.
If we're ready to move on to public comment, any further board comment on this item? Because I do want to get to the hearing. Terry, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yeah, actually, we have about 6 or 8. And do you want me to have 3 minutes each, or should I reduce the time so that we can make time for the hearing?
I think we have to do 2, because I think we're going to have a lot of comments on the hearing as well.
Okay, all right. The first 2 speakers, Andrew McCullough, then Larry Menikes, please, in that order. Go ahead, Mr. McCullough.
Yeah. Actually, this is not an item for which I'd intended to raise my hand. So excuse me, I want to wait till the next item.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Menikes.
Good evening, board. Second, so there's earlier comments that need far more information to water users, because I'll bet you the top 10% using a quarter of our water, right? And it may not be true, Cynthia, but I'll bet you the top 10%. I saw that. I'll bet you the top 10% are using far more.
I think that's fair.
Than the lower 50% of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
Yes,
Okay.
that's fair.
Okay, that's more accurate. I've only got 2 minutes. I'll be quick. You asked the question of the board, of staff, in terms of coming back with something. Is you're going to reach these people? And item 8, and you are just going to have to have. This is what happened in '76 and '77, and I remember the fines were really significant. And if you're and when you get that item 8, we're starting out way too low. It's going to help. And with that, I will yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next 2 speakers, Baron Hamill and Roger Roberts, please. Go ahead, Ms. Hamill.
Thank you. If I could have 3 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Carol, really, we have to have the same rules for everybody, and you're going to comment to get on the next item, so you'll have plenty of time to talk.
Okay, thank you. To say we have a problem that is only getting worse is an obvious understatement. Based on what I heard at the Operations Committee meeting last Friday, you're soon going to need people to save 70% of their year-over-year water usage to avoid running out of water entirely next year. But few people know how much water they're actually using. Our marketing campaign has only gotten us to a 26 to 30% savings for the past month, and it's trending in the wrong direction. This is hardly a solution to quickly achieving the 40% conservation goal in place. At this rate, 70% savings will be unattainable. The solution I proposed to the board at the meeting a month ago is to give every eligible household its own flume water meter and offer setup assistance where needed. Another participant at that meeting extolled the benefits of having a flume device, and Director Russell and other members of the board quickly picked up on it. The results that can be achieved with this approach will be multifold to our current water savings, as people who already have flume devices can attest. Their experience is testimony to that. Using flume enables them to immediately know the results of their conservation efforts. Knowledge of water usage gives a person the power to conserve more. Imagine how much more water could be saved if you allow all these households that are eligible to have that power. You have the ability to see the results of households that already have flume devices installed. I urge you to use this knowledge to be more proactive and aggressive with a quick and easy approach that enables people to achieve the desired conservation goals. Knowledge is power, and in this case, the power to conserve more water. Thank you again.
Thanks. I'm just going to note for members of the public who may not be aware, we are offering a fairly significant rebate for flume devices. And Carrie, you can speak to how they're pretty much flying off the shelf. So we very much agree with the speaker. I think the question about, the extent to which we have the capacity to ramp up to that extent, to that degree is something we're talking about. But we certainly are aware and are obviously very strong advocates for getting as many flume devices out in the public as possible. And who's the next questioner?
Mr. Roger Roberts, please.
I meant commenter, sorry.
I'm getting feedback. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
But you can't hear me? I'm getting, whatever, anyway. My question is about communication strategy. Are you feeding storylines to other sources of information, magazines, papers like the Chronicle, et cetera, et cetera? There's an opportunity to feed storylines to other information sources for people, and I just wonder what you're doing in that regard.
Emma, do you want to speak to that very briefly?
Yeah, so we reach out to other regional media often. We're responding to a number of requests. Usually after board meetings, there's a number of requests from regional media that come in. So if the question is whether we just focus hyper locally, the answer is no. We definitely take a regional approach, and whether we're communicating to people that are customers or not, I think awareness about the district and our stance on drought response is important to get out regionally as well.
Next two speakers, Douglas Scherf and Carol Posson, please. Mr. Scherf.
There is a different need for a home that has a landscape garden than there is for a single person in a condo. I have a half an acre that we've worked on for 40 years that I would like to not lose. I'm consulting with several contractors to install a water tank on my property, but I need someone to deliver recycled water once a month. And if you can't do it yourselves, perhaps you can advertise this concept and find some independent contractors who'd be willing to do it. I have talked to a contractor who said he is delivering water, and I haven't gotten the prices yet. But I have to imagine there are an awful lot of people in Marin who don't want to lose their yards and would consider this approach. So please look into recycling water.
Thank you for the comment.
Ms. Posson or Posen?
Yes, my name is Carol Poseen and I live in Greenbrae. I want to respond to the excellent public outreach efforts that you've made and reported on. I have a suggestion. There are neighborhood response groups and other already existing networks to neighborhoods that are very effective and in constant touch with their neighborhood. And I wonder if your public education outreach people might be able to connect with them, to invite them to a meeting or in some other way, use this already existing network to reach out to people. I have another suggestion. I've decided to ask 130 neighbors to a block party at my house. I will serve cookies and cider, etc., so they will come. But I will also show them how we have piped our laundry water to our gardens. I'll show them our flume flow meter, how it works and how you install it on the spot. And our next door neighbor is engaged to show them her newly installed artificial turf. I'm looking for more ideas and I'm perfectly willing to make this into a documented model if anybody else would like to use it. But I can see a lot of people really engaged and wanting to do something positive in support of your efforts. And maybe this is one way that you could engage them because, a lot of us like to have parties and we'd like to help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are great suggestions. And I'm going to ask Emma to follow up because we would love to post a video of that event. That just sounds great. So really appreciate your coming in for the comment.
The last two speakers, Jennifer O'Mara and Jan Lotion, in that order, please.
Can I ask somebody needs to mute? There's a lot of background noise that's super distracting.
Ms. O'Mara?
Hi, I'm here, but I'm not sure if I'm the person who's distracting. I'm just waiting for that person. So hi. So first of all, I completely agree with a previous speaker, Ms. Mullen. There are so many organizations out there that are willing to partner with Marin Water, and there's no connection between them. There's no organization between them. There's no communication between them to actually start implementing some stuff. And then, I'm sorry, so there's a lot of discussion about what you've done, but if you look at what you've done, which is a lot of it is great, but a lot of it is having everybody come to Marin Water. There's so many points that you can touch the community and get the community engaged, give them the information that is missing. For example, I've been signed up with Marin Water since 2018 on your system. The only emails that I received from Marin Water are, we received your payment scheduled, whatever, aside from the one email in 2018 that said, you're now signed up with Marin Water. You have, I'm sure, thousands of people that are signed up with Marin Water, and you have their emails, your customers, they are engaged with you. Send them this is what we're going to do this month, and give them an outline of what they can do easily internally and externally, and also give them a thank you. You rocked. Everybody in your neighborhood has been saving. Just a once a month update. Another thing is I'm one of the people that participated in the pick up your recycled water. Touch them, give them, nobody has asked me, do you have aerators? Do you have a shower head? You're in the same parking lot as the COVID testing. Tons of people go through there. Give them a handout. Okay, my time is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lotion?
I'm just gonna say quickly, thanks again for the comment. And Emma, do you want to follow up? Because I think we do have an email campaign. So I'm concerned that some people aren't participating in that.
We do. We have about 25,000 customer emails entered through customer service that is sent monthly or more frequently. We also, have been to those 60 different community presentations. So we definitely have reached out to community groups. And if there are others that we have missed, we have not connected with, we're more than happy to reach out and schedule presentations. So please follow up, and I would be happy to connect with whichever groups you're referencing.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Ms. Lotion?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm very disappointed in the water district. I think you have miserably failed to inspire the public to conserve water. We are 9 months into this year and you're still under 30%. I think it's pathetic. I think part of the problem is your language is much too muted. This is an extreme situation, very grave, and your language is just way too gentle. I wrote a letter to the Marin IJ some time ago, and I ended it with, for those people who are worried about their withering lawns, how are you going to feel when there's no water coming out of your faucet? I think we need stronger language here. People are not getting it. You're just too polite and too mild-mannered. Here are my suggestions. First of all, the only bumper sticker I could find at your water district office is so tiny you can barely be seen. It's drive it dirty. It's very difficult to see. Why don't we have a bunch of water stickers? Water conservation stickers. I went online to find them. Why isn't half of Marin County driving around with bumper stickers that says save water? Secondly, signs. Why aren't there signs up in everybody's yard, whether you are using a lot of water or you're not using a lot of water? Why aren't there signs everywhere? Thirdly, while you sent out something on the part of your news about ways to save water, I still think you need about a card that's about, say, 6 by 8 inches that has about 10 ways to save water inside the house and outside the house that people put on the refrigerator. You're way too over-dependent on these webinars. Webinars are preaching to the choir. You don't go to a webinar if you're not concerned. Most of the people in this county still don't get it, and you don't get that most of the people don't get the severity of this thing. And then the last one is the Marin IJ keeps coming out with articles about desalination and stuff. That's giving people false hope. What you should be sending a message about the failure of the public to conserve water, and that is our greatest hope.
Thank you, Ms. Lotion. Your time is up. I apologize. I have one more speaker, Jenna Payne. Go ahead, Ms. Payne.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that you all have on your hands to address the situation. It's certainly a huge one that we all need to take part in. And one thing that has come to mind is that not everyone gets to be on these board meetings to really understand the gravity of what this drought consists of, what the water levels are of the reservoirs. And I think understanding that really inspires people to go into action. And perhaps there's some simple language that could be done in every town, that there's a large sign that is like a water meter and shows you the level at which the reservoir is. And I think creating something that everyone, like a visual that everyone can really see and identify with of, oh, we're at 35%, because that's a pretty serious statistic. And when you see that number, and if you see it going down, and down, like if it's an actual kind of thermometer or a meter or whatever kind of an image that we could create that everyone is associating with, it might be something that all the community is then suddenly a part of and recognizing their own ability to affect what that meter does. And it might tie in nicely with all these other efforts. So just thought I'd put that out there.
Thank you.
Thanks for that comment.
There are no further speakers.
Okay, let's move on then to the next.
I do have one last comment on
I'm
this.
sorry, Jack, of course.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And maybe you have all, it jumped out at you before, but this jumped out at me for the first time in this conversation. There are a lot of people out there who have leadership ability and who are putting together groups to push on the conservation. Yes, we send them emails and we communicate to them. We should identify those leaders and build on that, literally create a conservation corps and help those people to set up those kinds of communication meetings and so forth, literally participate in it. We have over the years, many times on big issues, created citizen community, like citizen committees, where we bring in leaders and try to get this is not the same, but it's something in that nature. It's literally to build a conservation corps among these leaders and then help them do what they're already trying to do, but could even do it better and with a greater widespread with our participation. Okay.
Great idea. If there's no more board comments, I'd like to move on to the hearing, item 8. So Molly, I want to make sure I get my words right here. I am now opening the public hearing.
President Kohler, we would be able to do a presentation first, and then we could open the public hearing once we're ready to hear from the board and public comment.
All right, then let's do that. Let's have that presentation and then we'll open the public hearing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good. I have the presentation. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. Let me pull my presentation up. You can all see my screen. So the item is establishing limits on water use. We're going to start with an overview, looking at the overview, a review of the September 7th board discussion, where we received input from the board and we covered a bit of the material that we want to make sure we get in front of you once again before we go into the key elements of the proposed ordinance number 454 and then wrap up with a recommendation. So review of the board meeting. So we looked at our single family residential customers and we looked at the occurrence by tier. So how often does each customer fall into each tier, both in the summer and in the winter. So starting with the summer, you can see that, of course, anyone who uses water is in tier 1. Just over 32% of our customers hit tier 2 during the summer, and about 9% go into those higher tiers 3 and 4. When we look at the water usage for the summer months, tiers 1 and 2 is really the primary tiers where the most water is utilized, if you would, and then about 10% of the water is being used for tiers 3 and 4. And of course, this is only for our single family residential customers. So it's really focused on that customer class, recognizing that that is the majority of our customer base. When we look at the winter months, the tiers 2 dropped significantly by about down to about a third, just over 10% hit tier 2, and then tiers 3 and 4 dropped significantly as well, down to less than 2% in total. And of course, the water use declines as well, right? Recognizing that during the summer months, our demands tend to double. Therefore, it makes sense that we have a lower usage in the tiers during the winter months. We did the same analysis for our for our dedicated irrigation meter customers as well. When we look at the occurrence by tier for both summer and winter for dedicated irrigation meter customers, you'll notice that the tiers, the percentage of customers hitting tiers 2 and 3 is fairly consistent between both summer and winter, yet the usage declined significantly in the winter months. And this really just demonstrates how our irrigation customers can manage their site's water use. So the way our dedicated irrigation billing structure, it really allows them to take their annual allotment and divvy up that annual allotment to each month. So it allows them to have a higher baseline, if you would, during the summer months, and then a lower amount in the winter months. And the fact that the percent of customers falling into tiers 2 and 3 is consistent throughout the year really just goes to show that our customers are utilizing this tool to actively manage their water use on these dedicated irrigation meter sites. I think that that's the intent of that rate structure design. We also took a look at a deeper look into our single family residential tiered structure. So what we have here are the tiers and the associated CCF. So 1 CCF is 748 gallons. And so for summer tier 1, you can use up to 26 gallons, 26 units. And in winter tier 1, you can use up to 21. So you can see the breakdown, and this is printed on all of our single family customers' water bills. What we then wanted to do is take a look and break that down into gallons per capita per day. And we assumed a 4 people per household, so a household of 4. And when we look at the GPCD, or the gallons per person per day in each of the tiers, you can see how those units really translate over to gallons. So with tier 1, summer water use in tier 1 could be up to 81 gallons per person per day, again for residents. And during the winter, it would be up to 65 gallons per person per day. And you can see how each tier escalates. We also looked at our guidance for residential indoor water use that was developed as part of our drought response, recognizing that we want to encourage all of our customers to be as efficient as possible, and we are seeing some use as low as 35 gallons per person per day or even lower. And so that's great, that's ideal, something to strive for everyone. But we also want to recognize that the state has established a standard through water conservation legislation, calling out 55 gallons per person per day as the statewide standard. And so when we compare that, our gallons per person per day within our tiers, specifically tier 1 in the winter, recognizing that winter water use is primarily indoor use, for a family of 4, we would be allowing for 65 gallons per person per day, which exceeds even the state standard. So we took this information that was previously presented to the board, and we developed the ordinance number 454, and I'll walk you through those key elements. Oops, jump ahead here. So we looked at establishing water use limits for winter use, starting with single family residential customers, again, assuming this 4 persons per household, because I think it's important to continue to talk about this as gallons per person per day. I think it's useful. So we look at tier 1, we would allow for up to 21 CCFs, which is 65 gallons per person per day during the winter months. And use within tiers 2, 3, and 4 would be prohibited. We would allow for adjustments for additional residents, recognizing that not all households have 4 people. We would allow an additional 50 gallons per person per day, or 4 CCF per billing period, for folks that can demonstrate that they have residents that are within the household, more than 4 residents in the household for more than 6 months out of the year. And there'll be an application process that they would go through to achieve, or to obtain those adjustments. For our dedicated customers, this is both dedicated irrigation and single family dedicated irrigation customers. For a winter billing cycle, we would have prohibited use in tiers 1, 2, and 3, which would mean all water use for these customers during the winter would be prohibited. In addition, this would mean that the baseline adjustments, or we're recommending that the baseline adjustments also be suspended. So as I mentioned, that customers can adjust their allotments for each billing period. We would suspend that process during this, while this prohibition was in effect for our dedicated irrigation customers. So we do have a proposed excess use penalties that staff has developed with input from the board. We had previously presented the same amount for each tier, and there was feedback to have the amounts escalate. So we've incorporated that feedback. Looking at our single family customers, we're proposing, or the ordinance currently proposes, tier 2 having a $5 per CCF penalty. Use in tier 3 would have a $10 per CCF penalty, and tier 4 at $15. Similarly, with irrigation customers, it would be the same rate, and it would start within tier 1 and go into tiers 2 and 3 as well. as we move into establishing water use limits for our summer billing periods as well are being proposed. For single family residential customers, again, assuming 4 persons per household, we would allow use within tier 1 up to 81 gallons per person per day, and tier 2 up to 184 gallons per person per day during the summer billing period. And tiers 3 and 4 would be prohibited and in turn have a penalty associated with use within those tiers. For dedicated irrigation customers and single family dedicated irrigation customers, we would allow tier 1 water use, which would allow for limited summer irrigation, but tiers 2 and 3 would be prohibited and in turn have a penalty. The penalties that are proposed for the summer simply do away with the initial tiers penalty, and it keeps the $10 at tier 3, $15 at tier 4, and then for irrigation, $10 at tier 2, $15 at tier 3.
Carrie, can I ask why the penalties are in CCFs? Nobody knows how many CCFs they're using. Why isn't this in gallons so that people understand?
That's an interesting question. It's because our we bill based on CCFs, right? That's our unit of billing. And so
No, I understand, but we need to communicate. I mean, the penalties aren't meaningful unless people understand what the penalties are. And nobody has any way of measuring in CCFs. I mean, I know we've had this conversation with you guys over and over and over again, but when we are communicating with customers, we need to work with them in units that they can understand.
Yeah, I think that's meaningful feedback that we would incorporate into our outreach materials. For this policy decision making, we wanted to present it as it relates to rates.
Okay.
Should I keep going? Or are there other additional questions?
Yeah, Carrie, I just wanted to note, of course, staff has done a lot of work putting this together, but on the actual amounts of the penalties, we're calling those recommendations with the understanding that it's really a policy decision on the amount of the penalty and how the increments go up. So there's not a lot of backup in these numbers. So that's really for the board to think about. I think, do these numbers work, or would you like to see different ones?
That's helpful, Ben. Thank you. I just have a couple more slides and then we can proceed with the discussion. When we look at implementation, starting with timing, the ordinance restrictions would be effective upon adoption. So immediately effective as part of our urgency ordinance. But the penalties would be effective December 1st. We recognize that this is really an opportunity to ensure having it be effective December 1st, right, it takes changes to our billing system and others, but also we want to ensure that our customers are aware of what is being rolled out. And there's an opportunity for us to encourage immediate demand reductions, even though the penalties don't begin until December. And so, staff will continue to work through all of our multiple outreach facets to ensure our customers know of any proposed or any penalties that are adopted, including website updates, social media, bill inserts, bill message, direct mailer, e-news as well has been added, which it didn't make it onto this slide. So we will work hard to, I think it's very important. We want to ensure our customers are aware of this transition. Moving to looking at the occupancy adjustment process. So this will be, like I mentioned, a formal process. A form will be posted on our website. Customer service will be available for anyone who has trouble getting onto our website or working through that process. And they would just need to provide documentation to us as noted within the ordinance. As with all of our water waste prohibitions, the variance and appeals process will remain in effect for others to pursue if needed. Finally, the recommendation is to adopt the proposed ordinance 454 to address the immediate need to discourage excess water use. This would establish water use limits for our single family and irrigation customers, and it would impose penalty charges for excess use. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
So I just want to pause here. I just need to keep checking in with our council. I'm not yet opening the public hearing. This is for the board conversation. I'm not opening the public hearing until the board conversation is done. Is that correct?
Yes, President Kohler,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
Great. I'm finally getting it after 15 years. So do we have any board comment on Carrie's presentation and the proposed ordinance? Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Oh,
Carrie, if you go back a couple of slides, I just want to understand, make sure I understand clearly, and maybe others. That right there is perfect. So a tier 4 user would pay penalties for each the $5 per CCF up to then the next tier 3 level, and so on and so forth. So it's the penalties would be cumulative for a tier 4 user, so to speak. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay. I just think that that's helpful to explain how that works. In terms of the penalty amounts, have we compared how this has been done with other water districts elsewhere, and what kind of penalty structures have been used?
We did during the last presentation, and that slide didn't get carried forward. There was a survey that was done by Mark Hildebrand of Hildebrand Consulting, who assisted us with this process. And it showed that across the state, there's an amazing range of penalties that have been developed, down as low as a couple of dollars and as high as, over 100. And in Healdsburg, it's 1,000. So, there's a significant range. And it, as Ben mentioned, it really is a policy decision.
Okay, that's helpful to understand where along the spectrum. Another question is: have we estimated if these ultimately we want these? We don't want the money. We want the reduction in water use. I think that's the important thing here. Have we estimated what the water savings would be if these penalties were 100% effective? Which I know that that's not the way it'll go. What would we see in terms of water savings?
Yeah, so we can, it's a winter months, right? It's a December, right? And so it really is focusing on indoor use. And so I think we can anticipate for these initial winter months about a 20% reduction would be, I think, realistic.
Okay, that's helpful.
I'm a little concerned about the penalties not being significant enough at the high end. I mean, we're talking about $15 for an extra 750 gallons of water. So it seems to me you're really targeting, obviously, tier 4 there. They tend to be, more high-end customers. So are you concerned that we're running the risk that people will just say, I'm willing to pay the extra $15? It seems like a pretty good deal, $15 for 750 gallons of water.
That is a concern, right? We need to make it high enough to motivate customers to reduce their demand. And again, these numbers were plugged in, recognizing that if the board had interest in increasing them or adjusting them, they would have the authority to do so and the ability to do so at this time.
Yeah. Okay. Any further board conversation on this before we open the public hearing?
A question.
Go ahead.
What about, it's based on a household of 4 people. Obviously, that across, there's households with 9 and 10 people. How do we accommodate for that? What do we do about that?
Yeah, Director Gibson. So we have an adjustment procedure to increase occupancy for any resident that has more than 4 persons per household. We would give them an additional 4 CCF per billing period, based on the number of additional folks beyond 4 within their household. So we recognize that.
They would apply for that, or?
Correct, they would apply for that.
Okay.
And then
do we have a way of looking at these penalties relative to what the total increase to their bill would be? So, understanding that this is that their bill would, with penalties, would only go up 20%. Maybe that's not a significant enough signal. If it doubles their bill, it probably would really get people's attention. Do we have a way of seeing these compared to what their bill would otherwise be?
Well, it's there at the bottom. You see where it says current per CCF.
So
Got it.
during the prior presentation, we showed an average bill and the impacts on an average bill to help provide a better understanding. But we recognize everyone's use is isn't average, right? And so I think looking at the increase in the cost per tier, as Cynthia and Director Kohler noted, is another way of looking at that potential impact.
Right. I mean, we've got tier 4 people and tier 3 people who are using 250 to over 310, CCFs. Am I getting those numbers right? I get, okay. So I don't know. I am concerned. I understand that $15 a CCF is, you're comparing that to basically 22, and it's a significant percentage. I just don't know that people who are using that much water are going to be disincentivized, with $15. So I think what we should probably do right now is, unless there's no further board questions, we should open the public hearing and then bring it back to the board, because it's already almost 9. So I'm sure there are going to be a lot of comments on this. So Molly, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there any other magic words I need to say?
You just said them, President Kohler. Perfect.
Okay, Terry, do we have any public comments as part of the hearing that is now open?
Yes, we have 6 so far. The first 2 speakers, 1402, then Mimi Willard, please. Go ahead, 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I appreciate the staff's work, and I hate to be broadly critical, but I have to admit that I personally had a very, very hard time understanding the details of the scheme and how it would work and how someone could figure out how it would apply to them. And this may emerge, the details of how that would happen, may emerge from additional exposition, but based on what I've heard, it's exceedingly confusing. And I do believe that in order to have a plan that is fair and effective, customers have to be able to understand it and how to go about modifying their behavior in order to avoid the penalties or diminish them based on a clear understanding of the procedure. So I hope either the exposition or the plan, the details themselves are clarified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Ms. Willard?
Yes. I'm Mimi Willard. I'm president of the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers.
Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Willard.
Thank you. I'm Mimi Willard from the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers. 2 years ago, this board adopted a new rate structure that shifted a big part of the typical bill to be based on the size of a person's meter, rather than almost entirely based on usage as it had been before. Cost at that time objected strenuously for 2 reasons. One, that this was contrary to Proposition 218, which says that you must charge proportionally to the cost of service. And the meter is not a metric for the cost of service. Utilization is. Number 2, and relevant to where we are now, shifting away from a usage-based billing, we said at the time, is anti-conservation. And it would come back to bite you in a drought because you've taken away the feedback of the bill. So here we are. This must be reconsidered ASAP. Paul Primo, at the time that you chose this particular rate structure, proposed an alternative that was simple and was based on usage. That should be reconsidered at the earliest possible moment. Thank you.
Is that it? Okay.
That's it. I'm just.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. The next 2 speakers, Andrew McCullough and then Baron Hamill, please, in that order.
Yeah, hi, this is Andrew McCullough. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, President Kohler, members of the board. When I got wind of this ordinance last week, I sent a note off to a number of you expressing my concern And I acknowledged at the end of my note that I didn't have access to the ordinance to make sure that my concerns were well-founded. I was gratified to find upon reading the ordinance on Friday that some of my concerns were not founded, but the significant ones still remain in effect, and I want to share them with you. And just for context, I'm speaking on behalf of irrigation customers generally, but specifically the Peacock Gap Golf Club, with which I've had a longstanding affiliation. I'm also a resident in the neighborhood of East San Rafael, Peacock Gap. So here are my concerns. And I think it's important to make it very explicit the differentiation that is occurring here between irrigation customers and residential customers. And I'm mixing the two slightly because there is a very small category of residential customers that have irrigation meters, but I think that's a very small subset. Residential customers are not penalized for their tier 1 usage during the winter months of December through May, but irrigation customers are. From the very first gallon of usage, they're into penalty territory and they're paying, in effect, double the normal rates. This may be fine for irrigation customers for whom their usage is purely ornamental, but there is a category of irrigation customers that rely on an adequate supply of water for their revenues, not unlike the MMWD. I would ask that this board direct or encourage staff to use the variance process to provide some relief to irrigation customers who are revenue dependent on a supply of water so that the penalties can be alleviated for that group of irrigation customers. I think there's a method to make this less onerous, because what will otherwise happen is businesses who rely upon irrigation water for revenues will start losing money in a very significant fashion if they're forced to pay penalties.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. The next speaker, Ms. Hamill.
Thank you. Quick question. In for tier 1 users, will Marin Water be able to tell us how to allocate our water? In other words, can indoor water be used outdoors? In an earlier meeting, I recall hearing Director Bragman say in passing that how we used our water would not be managed. I'd like to hear confirmation of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
You're
Ben.
muted, Cynthia.
Address that.
Yeah, this is water consumption. So if someone was able to maintain tier 1 water, for example, in the winter and use shorter showers, yeah, they'd be able to not be in the penalty if they did some garden watering, for example, if they needed to and it was dry. So this is really looking at how much water is consumed, with us anticipating in the winter it would be largely indoors.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers, Barbara Salzman, Roger Roberts, and Rick Adler, please, in that order.
Yeah, I'm Barbara Salzman, and I've spoken to you before about my dissatisfaction about your approach. I just can't understand why the approach is so weak, and it doesn't convey any sense of urgency to people who don't care or don't get it or don't understand. You know, you're depending on all of the people who are motivated to save water. I agree completely with Cynthia. The penalty at the top is way too low. People who are using that much water probably wouldn't care in the least about paying that off. They would consider it, you know, they're doing their job by paying their bill. And I would like to say something about the flume meter. I mean, you think it's a good thing that you're paying some of the flume meter, but if people aren't motivated, they're not going to want to pay anything for a flume meter. If you think a flume meter is beneficial for conservation, then require it and pay for it, and you provide it for people. So anyway, one last thing about the IJ ad. With the butterfly, it's like things are okay, you know, it's a funny little cute butterfly that the environment is doing okay. You need to convey some urgency, and I think that this ordinance is way too weak. Sorry, I wish I could say something else, but I can't.
Barbara, we wouldn't expect you to. Thank you for coming and thank you for that, for those comments.
Mr. Roberts?
Can you hear me? I'm getting feedback, but can you hear me?
We can still hear you, sir.
Sorry?
We can hear you.
Okay. What if, whatever rates you choose, what if they don't work? They're not achieving what you're trying to achieve. And will there be an opportunity? And I think you should explain to people that this is a test. And if you don't pass the test, then we're going to increase the rates further. I mean, I'm not sure at all that what's proposed today is the proper rate. I think it should be more steeply progressive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Roger, you've put your finger on it, that this is a first step. I think a number of us are feeling that it might be too modest a first step, and then we'll bring this back to the board to discuss. But I don't think there's any question that we are in a position to continue to move up on the penalties if that's where we need to go.
Mr. Rick Adler, then after Mr. Rick Adler is James Krajewski, please.
Yes, I think that what we have here is with the consumption is the same as with the conservation. About a third of the people are community oriented, think about others as well as themselves. About a third of the people are too old, too sick, too tired, too busy. They just don't pay any attention at all. And about a third of the people are really selfish, and they just, you're going to use whatever they want. They don't care about anything, anybody else or the community. That creates a great conundrum. As far as these penalties go, I think they're way too low. Half of my block is now filled with millionaires, and these penalties, they wouldn't even pick it up off the floor. It's just way too low. I think they need to be much higher, and then you could have a appeals process for those that really need the water but can't afford the penalties. You could have an appeals process, and if the penalties don't work, maybe we need a flow restrictor for the third tier. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Krajewski, please.
Hi, everybody. I thought this was an extremely confusing proposal. And for example, it was households of 4, but then it was confusing about households of 2. And there were initials on there, which I didn't understand. Well, I think one was GPCD or something, which they said was number of gallons per day or something, but I didn't understand that. It's not clear, probably to most people, and it wasn't clear to me, what an irrigation customer is versus a household, because I have irrigation, if you will, because I have a yard. So all of these things need to be clear in a proposal. And as somebody mentioned, the business about cubic feet and gallons, cubic feet are not meaningful like acre feet. It needs to be in terms of gallons per person, and it needs to be for 2 households, 4 households, or how somebody can figure that out if they've got 5 in a household. So my suggestion would be that this needs to be put on hold for a couple of weeks. It needs to be fleshed out. It needs to be put out on the website well in advance of meetings, and people need to be encouraged. There needs to be something in the IJ about this so people know where to go and look for this. I do think that it's possible that these rates are too low and won't work, but without the data behind all of this, it's an understanding what this means for these different groups. It's hard to know. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last 2 speakers, Larry Minikes and Jennifer O'Mara, please. Go ahead, Mr. Minikes.
Thank you. Good evening again, board. I'd like to make a suggestion. There's been a lot of good comments tonight. There really has. For the last gentleman, I think if you put it at the bottom of each slide, what GDP, PDP, whatever's coming up, what those mean, and so that people can understand gallons, because people think in gallons. It's understandable. Having come to a lot of these meetings, I understand the terminology and I take it for granted. What I'd like to offer is on tier 2, it will be king, if I may say, so that families go, oh, we got to cut back. I just got to go, it went up like X. But I might offer on tier 4 that might help a lot is first the what's being proposed is too low, but you start at you could stair-step policy for the first three CCFs, this much, then that much, then that much, to where you to $100 per CCF. So that if they're using that much, that's a small percentage, it really is a wake up. And I see the public supporting something along those lines. And with that, I thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Ms. O'Mara, please.
Hi. First of all, I've sat through the video of your meeting last week, and I realized how difficult of a challenge everybody has in front of you. Looking at the numbers that have been presented and understanding people, I don't understand why we're looking at an additional charge for tier 4. And maybe legally we can't restrict the water flow. But I lived through the LA water crisis years ago, and people that exceeded any reasonable usage, their taps were not shut off, but they were restricted. And it's a tough decision, but sometimes people would rather write a check for tier 4 penalties than actually pay their gardeners to go down to the recycling center and pick up water, because it's cheaper for them to write the check for tier 4. It's something just to consider, and maybe we can't consider it, but there's some hard decisions because of how close we're coming up against the wall in this district. And I just would like to hear why we're not considering just saying, you know what, you can't do tier 4 anymore, or we just restrict your water, and here's the recycling district, you pay your gardeners to go down and get it. That's all.
Thank you. We do have one more speaker, Grace.
Ask Ann or Carrie to respond to that, because I think a lot of people have had that question, including board members.
I was taking a note from earlier. Could you capture that?
Why aren't we simply restricting tier 4 customers rather than giving them the option of simply paying for the additional, just paying more money to get the same water?
Right, thank you. I think one way to look at it is that it can fall into, I believe President Kohler, you noted that this is a step. And we can, if we aren't getting the action based on if the board proceeds in some direction, we can monitor the high water users, and we can bring back an approach to put on restrictors. That is complicated and has issues, but it is done around the state in severe cases. Or we could raise the penalties until we do see the signal we're looking for. So I think, at least for me, I'm looking at this as a big, important step, but is it going to be perfect? Probably not, but we'll be able to monitor and understand what's going on and adaptively manage to get where hopefully we need to go.
Okay. Ms. Garrity, please.
Yes, this is Grace Garrity in Terra Linda, and I agree that the penalties are probably in tier 3 and 4 much too low, but I understand your approach in terms of testing. But my big issue is, why is the onus on single family homes? I've made it my mission to speak frankly with people who live in apartment buildings and people who work in Marin. And, they are not conserving. There is nothing in office bulletins or in grocery bulletins for employees to conserve. I don't understand it. why is it just single family residences? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we do have an answer for that. So I don't know if that's Ben or Carrie, but I want to be sure we answer that question because other people have asked it as well.
Yeah, I'll start and Carrie can fill in. This is not just single family. We are very active in the institutional, in the commercial, in the irrigation sectors. A very active program, for example, at restaurants. We physically have gone in the last about 6 weeks to each and every restaurant. And now most do have the table tents up, and a good number do have posters in front of the window, and they do ask. And that's just an example. It's business by business, sector by sector. We're enforcing against irrigation users and working with them, and we've seen great reduction. So this is every drop matters, and it's definitely not just single family residents.
Well, I think though, Ben, and that's great, but I think that's a very helpful response. But I think the question is about the penalties. The penalties are only for irrigation users in single family residences, right? We haven't put penalties in place for businesses or multifamily.
Right. So multifamily, many of them and probably most have dedicated irrigation meters. So that meter would fall in a way very similar of single family residents. They'd be under this structure and be penalized if they have excessive water during the winter, like in their irrigation meter. Actually, any water in their irrigation meter in the winter is going to be penalized. So we've developed this with the intention to greatly discourage irrigation use, drive it down across all sectors, across all of our customer base, and looking very broadly at that.
Jerry, do we have any more questions or comments?
There are none.
Okay, so I think at that point, Molly, I believe I'm closing the public hearing. And I am bringing this back to the board. Do we have any board comments on this item following the public hearing? This is an action item.
Sure, I've got a few. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, just a question, I think a quick question. On the concept of, well, I mentioned the large families, they can come in and apply for a variance. Will we have a variance procedure in general that people can, I didn't hear any talk about that, but I assume that's built in there, right? We'll have a.
Yeah, that was in. Yeah. That was in Carrie's presentation, that there's a variance procedure.
Good. Or in general, across the board, not just for large families. Yeah.
Right.
Any exception for, yeah, okay.
Correct. The adjustment for, if I may, the adjustment for a single family residential is a separate process, but we still have the variance process that's been in place for our water conservation program, and that applies in this case as well as an appeals process.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Monty.
No. So, I think that a couple of the comments that we've heard from folks are very helpful, and and we are hearing, I think, a fairly consistent message about how whether our message is getting through to some people. I think some folks have gotten it. They don't need a very strong message. These penalties are a strong message, and I'm wondering whether we need to, whether there's part of our outreach that needs to have, I think, just similarly a stronger, clearer message that we need action. And so I'll leave that to Emma and others to consider whether there is a stronger way to convey that, so that we do reach those people who maybe are not really. That need a stronger message, and these penalties are definitely intended to be part of that. I think we also need to give consideration to what we will do as a board and as a district if we do not see a strong response to these penalties. Again, we expect that there will be, but I think as Director Kohler said, this is one step, but it's a really important step. We are trying to consistently increase the message to get more of a response. And I think that this is again, not meant to, I don't think we think that it's going to do the entire trick that we need, but it is an important step. I know that part of the reason why we are trying to make a decision here is so that we can start notifying our customers several months in advance, in all fairness. And so on that, I think we really do need to think very carefully about the message that does go out to our customers to explain this. And it is difficult to understand. It is not the most straightforward thing. And I had to ask my own clarifying questions to be sure that I understood things. And I'm not the brightest person that's necessarily on this call, but we need to make it so that it really is as easy to understand as possible for our customers, so that they can respond how we'd like, which is to conserve water, especially if they're in the upper tiers. I'm wondering whether in order for us to have these penalties go into effect, whether we need to take action today in order to institute these penalties come December, or whether we can send something out in our billings that tell people these penalties are coming. And, with the idea that it could buy us some time to really think about how steep a rate structure or a penalty structure, I should say, we need to consider for the upper tiers in order to get really a commensurate response. So I guess that last one is a question.
I'm sympathetic, but I'm also concerned. I mean, I think we've heard, I think correctly from a lot of people, these are very modest penalties. Plenty of people are just going to pay them. And the timing right now is almost 6 months out. I mean, just to play it out, these penalties already aren't going in effect until December. And since people don't get a bill for another 2 months, nobody's going to have any idea whether they've been penalized until February. Have I got that right, Ben?
Yeah, that is a challenge we have with bi-monthly billing.
So if we keep pushing it out, I mean, if anything, I was actually going to suggest the opposite, that we put these into place starting in November. I mean, we do have a full month of, a capacity to let people know we've been signaling this for a long time. I mean, I think you'd have to be pretty, and I know there are people who are, somebody said, I think quite reasonably, there are people who have other things going on in their lives, and I understand that. But I think 5 weeks is a lot of time for us to get out what should be, frankly, a fairly simple message, right? We're in a drought. We're not getting where we need to go. If you're not going to comply, with these restrictions, there will be penalties. It should be fairly straightforward. There may be complications on the district side, but the messaging should be clear. It should be simple. It should be straightforward. The term CCF should never appear. And I mean, these are things we've been discussing literally for years. I don't mean to be frustrated, but I just don't think we have 6 months to play games here. We're not achieving our goals. The proposal today is already, again, modest. It's not going into effect for effectively 5 months. So, I don't see a benefit in delaying to craft messages. If we can't craft a message at this point about the need to conserve, then we have bigger problems.
If I could, I'm confident that staff would be able to craft the message in accordance with everything we've heard in the board direction in a way that the customers will understand the action and what they need to do. And directly on your comment, Director Schmidt, I think a challenge in going that way would be until the board adopts the penalties, we don't know in order to inform the customers exactly what the action is. So I fear Molly could speak more definitively that would just push the clock out, however long we waited for the board action until it was effective.
Well, I would make the point that the ordinance is an urgency ordinance, and it would be effective immediately. The prohibition for water use would be effective immediately. However, because we have a bi-monthly meter reading, we would not know whether water use was happening before the actual action took place. So we really do need to give the 2-month billing period in order to be sure that water use, the compliance with water use was within the period for which we would be, or failure to comply rather, was within the period of time for which we were billing and reading the meters.
Would therefore not be, people would not even be getting these notices until February, because we're talking about not making this effective until December. So I mean, we are so far down the road. I mean, we're missing a full 5 months that we could be asking people to conserve. And I appreciate Molly's point that it would go into effect immediately. But I mean, what we've seen is that, I mean, I think it's unrealistic to assume that people are going to get the message because we've passed an ordinance. The message is going to come through with the penalties. So, I mean, we are already 5 months out. So I don't know how comfortable are my fellow board members just basically, I mean, I don't want to say doing nothing, but we are effectively delaying this entire process for 5 months.
I don't think we have time to delay. That's not what I'm proposing or the question that I was asking. So I think we need to do something. I'd like us to figure out what we can do now and get it into effect, because it's really the effect that we need, and we need it as soon as we can in all reasonableness and in all fairness.
Well, I mean, I think what we can do is vote on this today. I mean, if there's a motion in a second, I will support it, but I have grave concerns that it's too little and taking way too long. I mean, this is something that is not going to have impact. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I'm not I'm not feeling like I'm getting across. I mean, 5 months is a long, long time given where we are today, guys. And we're basically saying there will be no penalties. There will be no consequences for failing to comply with this ordinance fully till February.
Well, they won't be paying the penalty until February, but the penalty itself will start to generate.
Not till December.
In December, yeah.
So that's another 2.5 months. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean,
we can't have it both ways. We can't say this is urgent, this is a problem, this is historic, and say we've got all the time in the world to deal with this.
As I'm understanding, though, it's a matter of the 2 months billing. I mean, how can we correct that? We
could put it into effect November 1st instead of December 1st. That would shave a month.
But I think as I understand it, there's a process within our billing system that gets jammed on that.
Is that
not right?
Not here in the.
Well, we simply don't know when the water use occurred because we're checking the meters every 60 days for each customer. So if the customer had been using a lot of water for the first month, the ordinance was passed and then started conserving and meeting the requirements, they'd still be getting penalized before we had adopted the penalty. That's the concern that I have.
I have an idea.
2 months before.
How about we contact, we take the tier 4 bills as they come out in the period of October, November, and we hand select them out and calculate what their revised bill would be with penalties and write them a letter and say, be advised that your current water bill generated a cost of $3,000. Your new water bill effective December 1st will be $14,000 or something like that. And get their attention. I mean, I think we're only talking about hundreds or perhaps thousands of these. It's a fair task, even a phone call to their house to say, we're calling to discuss your water bill and what's going to happen as a result of these penalties that are being put into place. The other thing I'd like to request is that on Thursday's finance meeting, I would like to see an average tier 1, average tier 2, an average tier 3, and an average tier 4 bill displayed on a cardboard piece of paper or a slide that says, today's bill is X, the next bill is 10X or 5X or whatever the numbers is. These are not nearly as small as people think they are. Larry Minicky's comment about $100 per CCF would result in $40,000 water bills for some people. So, you know, I don't know. Well, maybe. I mean, it's a lot of money. I think you're far underestimating the blowback that's going to occur from the higher end water users. I don't think they're just going to go, oh, well, my water bill went up. It's okay. I think you will get their attention. It may not cause a pain in their wallet, but it will cause definitely a pain in their backside. There will be response to these penalties.
I don't disagree with you. My concern is that it's not going to happen until February. That's my concern.
I fully understand. That's what I'm trying to head off by saying, let's use this period before to tell them on December 1st what's going to happen. Or maybe we can do it on November 1st.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think take their last 2 months ago bill. It doesn't matter which bill you pick. Say your bill in July that you got for $682 will now be $6,082, you know, or whatever the numbers are. But just instead of saying we have to wait and get the numbers, and Molly's right, it takes time. There's a thing about baseline in here. So that I think that's what she's talking about. The baseline's established in October, November. That's cool. But we don't need to wait. Go back and get their old bill and just say that bill will move forward and be this number the next time you see it, you know, which is like in January or February.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a great idea. It is 9:20. I'm just going to ask if we can close this conversation and if there's a motion to move forward with the ordinance. Unless anybody feels strongly we have to keep talking about this. Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Do we have any further board comment on this item? Okay, and I think, Molly, I do not, again, need to go to public comment because we've had the public comment.
That's correct. You have closed the public hearing.
Okie dokie. Then at this point, we are looking for a roll call vote.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. I'd also like to add to this, given this board conversation, some specific non-ordinance direction to staff to come back to us fairly quickly to the full board, either at a finance committee meeting or another meeting fairly soon, with sort of fleshing out the proposal to inform tier 4 and tier 3 users about the potential impacts to their bill based on bills that they have already received. And I realize that's imperfect. Summer bills are going to be different than fall bills, but nevertheless, we're talking about otherwise. Anyway, I just want to be clear that that's another action item for the staff.
It may be better, Cynthia, because there'll be even bigger effects on the summer bills.
Right.
So on that, and I think it's how you phrased it, for staff to look into it and come back to the board on some kind of within the resources and capabilities of our systems, maybe some options we'd bring back to the board.
Yeah. And this is specifically about communicating with the tier 4 and tier 3 customers and, you know, possibly people on the higher end of tier 2. I mean, we'll leave that to you. Okay.
Or you know, go as far as you can go. Start with the big ones and work your way down and, you know, within the resources available.
Yeah. Okay, we have a lot of items left. Our next item is additional water use restrictions. We've got 30 minutes on this, guys. I'm not going to make it till midnight tonight. So I guess one question I have is, do we just have this whole conversations about water use restrictions, you know, whether we can move through this a little more quickly.
Is there anything we can put on to another meeting?
Well, after this one, the other items are very quick.
Okay.
This does have a couple items the board may want to consider to be brought back for action. I think we can go through it very quickly.
Okay.
Very good. I have this item as well. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing from me by now.
Not at all.
So I have additional water use restrictions, a quick overview. So we are going to start with some best in class, and then we're going to move into best in class, of course, would be more long-term. And then we'll transition into more of drought response and a couple of items that staff has developed or would like to get before the board, of course, for your consideration, and then finally wrap up with next steps. So starting with best in class, I have Peter Mayer with us. Peter Mayer is a professional engineer and consultant with Water DM. He's known for his industry-leading work in residential end use studies, which have been done through the Water Research Foundation. His work focuses on urban water management, design and evaluation of water efficiency programs, and water use research. His client list is extensive, and it happens to include a number of our arid climate friends in the Southwest, whose policies we tend to bring up and discuss. And so it was a good opportunity for us to bring an expert on board to take a look at a deeper dive into some best in class programs. So I'll have Peter cover the next handful of slides.
Well, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Again.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can while still being as clear as possible for the audience. So what we're looking at here is a pie chart of the water demand for 2020 for Marin water by sector. And so there's the single family sector, the multifamily sector, commercial, institutional, governmental. Landscape is the dedicated landscape sector. There's another miscellaneous sector, and then water losses. If you look at that pie a little bit more broadly, the residential and the landscape sector together make up about 73%. The non-residential sector by itself, that's the commercial and the institutional, makes up about 16, 17%, and the water loss about 10%. Thinking in terms of GPCD, and that is gallons per capita per day. That is the water used by a person over a day averaged through a year. And it's an important metric, and we're going to look at it a couple of different ways tonight. So first of all, total gallons per capita. That's if you take the total water produced over the course of a year, divided by the population, and then by the number of days. And you do that for Marin, and you get 128.1 gallons per capita per day. But if we just look at the residential sector, just the single family and the multifamily put together, they account for 87 gallons per capita per day of that 128.1. And then the remainder is made up of the non-residential and the water loss. So that's just where we're starting from. Now, how does that compare with other places around the country, and particularly in the arid West? So if you look, there is a wide variety of total GPCD, ranging from almost 3 times what you're seeing in Marin to about 100 gallons per capita per day. Around 100 gallons per capita per day is considered a highly efficient level of water use for a large utility. Moving to the next slide, this shows where you are in comparison with other utilities in California. The red line is Marin water, and this is just a large number of utilities using data from the Department of Water Resources. Marin's kind of right in the middle. Next up, we're going to compare Marin at 128, the second one over on the left there, with your neighborhood regional utilities. And so here, there are definitely some utilities that are getting closer to the 100 or even below 100 gallons per capita per day. And so you are definitely not the most efficient utility in the region. Okay. Then what about thinking about comparisons with other water utilities across the arid West? And so we're going to look just briefly at Albuquerque, Colorado Springs, El Paso, Texas, Grand Junction, Colorado, which is the smallest one in comparison, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Southern Nevada, which is Las Vegas, Tucson, and then Southern Utah. And so this is just gives you some of the basic statistics about each one. The next slide actually shows some more valuable comparisons, in particular how much each of these areas in a given year is spending on water conservation. And for Marin, we have a normal year of about $2 million, and then in parentheses, what is being spent in the current year, or is anticipated to be spent in response to the drought. So you'll see that on a per capita basis, the conservation spending in a normal year in Marin is extremely comparable and higher than many of these other utilities. The only one that I've seen at the $10 or higher level actually in a given year would be Southern Nevada. This year they were at $7 per capita, but in other years during more severe droughts and also when they were trying to buy more turf, they spent at a higher level. But you can see in your drought level, you guys are really off the charts at a high level of per capita spending on water conservation. All right, let's move on. So how to manage your demand for the long term, thinking about the situation that you're in. So generally there are two approaches. Approach number one is one that everybody uses, and that is where you basically manage demand through fixture indoor standards, various landscape rules and regulations of varying strength, community engagement, and incentives. Approach number two is being adapted more and more by water utilities, and that's the approach where you manage demand via indoor and outdoor water budgets. You tell people essentially this is how much water you are allowed to use, and then you penalize them when they start to exceed that volume of water. You use alerts, you use reminders, you use your rates. You still need to use community engagement and incentives. And in reality, utilities that are working towards approach number two are really doing a combination of both of these approaches because there is an overlay. So first of all, let's think about best in class for indoor water use. And so before we can jump into indoor water use, I think it's important to take a look at indoor water use for single family homes in Marin. And you have the advantage of having quite a few homes that now are equipped with the Flume monitoring device. And I've been working with Flume to help them evaluate and utilize the data that they're collecting. And so I asked them to run a query where they calculated the average indoor gallons per person per day for each county in California for the second quarter of 2021. So this is for the period of April, May, and June of 2021, the most recent period available. And for this period of time, the single family customers in Marin had the most efficient level of indoor water use at around 36. Now, this is not a perfect sample by any means, but these are all Flume users, so they certainly ought to be comparable across all of these counties and a reasonable approximation of the indoor use. It tells me that your indoor use in Marin is already at a fairly efficient level. I've done studies on homes equipped with water sense fixtures and appliances, and they achieved a level of around 35 gallons per person per day of water use indoors. So if you were able to already have this level, it suggests to me that there's probably less in the best in class available on the indoor side than you might think. You're also doing many of the things already, including this type of leak detection with Flume. You're working towards an AMI system that could give you leak detection across your service area. So my general estimation is that you have a better long-term prospects at reducing demand outdoor in the outdoor sector and then perhaps in the non-residential sector. So thinking about outdoor best-in-class programs, go to the next slide. This is an example of really the strongest landscape development code in the United States, and that is in Las Vegas, Nevada, where they prohibit all new turf from being installed in front yards. They allow some plantings, as you can see from this photo, but no turf is permitted. In residential backyards and side yards, turf is limited to a maximum of 50% of landscape area and no more than 5,000 square feet. It is capped at 5,000 square feet. They also don't allow any turf areas smaller than 100 square feet. They also very cleverly define functional turf, and that is legally defined there. It's legal, and so to understand the definition of functional turf, it's essential for understanding then the converse which is non-functional turf. And so non-functional turf ends up being the grass between roads and sidewalks, in medians and traffic circles, and such. So in this photo, the non-functional turf would be the grass that's right in front of you there. But as you can see, there's a median strip that actually has already been replaced with more appropriate plantings. It's important to realize that Marin already has a prohibition on irrigating turf in medians. This program in Las Vegas is comparatively new, and it was just introduced as legislation in March. It has been approved now, and the completion of the removal of all of the non-residential turf is supposed to be done by January 1st of 2027. So then a next best-in-class program, which Marin is also doing, is the turf replacement, also known as Cash for Grass. This is quite ubiquitous now across many water providers across the western United States. Typically, we're seeing $2 per square foot, $3 per square foot sometimes. Once in a while, when the wholesaler and the retailer gets together, it goes up to $4 per square foot. It's pretty clear that $2 is covering the cost of removing the turf and leaving bare ground pretty effectively. You got to pay more than that to actually, if you want to pay for something to replace the landscaping. Not all turf replacement programs are the same. And it's important to consider what is going to go in afterwards and what is going to be the water requirement of what goes in afterwards. You need to make sure you replant with something that's appropriate climatologically, and I would argue culturally as well. And you need to think about what would be the water requirement for what you are going to allow to replace the turf. And that leads you directly to a very important concept called landscape water budgets. Landscape water budgets. A landscape water budget is a management tool that is used to estimate the volume of water that a landscape reasonably needs throughout the year. And to create a budget, you consider the size of the landscape, how much water that landscape needs, the local climate. You can consider how much water supply you have available and reduce it accordingly, and a variety of other factors. It essentially creates a water use target for each customer. And these budgets can be used informationally. They do not have to be tied to rates. They can be used simply informationally to communicate with customers, and particularly to help the utility to identify inefficient water users. They can be connected to an inclining block rate structure, but it does not have to be done that way. And it's also common practice to reduce a water budget allocation as a landscape size increases. So you do not have to allocate the same volume of water across the entire landscape, and perfectly reasonable, and many utilities in fact cap landscape water budgets at a certain size. This is a proven tool for long-term water demand management. Marin's already taken the first steps to move in this way by measuring residential landscape area, and is also then hoping to move in the area of measuring other areas. There are quite a few utilities across California that use water budgets associated with their rate structures. I encourage you to explore this budget-based rate website, which, and you can see, utilities have all different flavors of it. Some of them use it for all their customer classes, some of them use it for some of their customer classes and not others. There's really no particular one flavor of this type of a method, and you got to figure out what fits best for your service area. Finally, it's important to realize what an essential tool water budgets can be for drought response, because during a drought, when you have landscape water budgets that have already been established, they can be reduced. And when you reduce a landscape water budget by a percentage across the entire service area, you are shrinking large budgets by 10% and small budgets by 10% or by 50%. And for big users, that means that they are curtailed volumetrically in a much different way. The other thing is then you can check every time you read the meter who is complying with your drought response and who is not complying. The research shows that this type of an approach, also combined with drought surcharge, which I know you guys are also considering tonight, are the most effective ways for managing water use during a drought. And that was one of the findings of this research study for the Alliance for Water Efficiency that I managed. And with that, I will turn it back to Carrie.
Very good. Thank you, Peter. And so we'll have an opportunity to ask Peter additional questions once we get through these key takeaways. So what we heard is that landscaping is really the primary opportunity for long-term savings, that informational water budgets do provide valuable guidance to our customers. Water budget-based billing is aspirational, but it's also attainable. And there's a number of models that are out there that we can learn from and leverage the work that they've already done as we consider to pursue those. And finally, that landscape restrictions can provide long-term savings and that will transform the plant palette within the community, and that certainly needs to be recognized. Hearing about the Southern Nevada Water Authority and the various programs that they have in place, specifically the prohibition on non-functional turf. To go through this process, they initially required a definition of what is functional turf, so then we know what we're prohibiting, right? It's either in one category or the other when we go through this process. And so we could leverage the good work that they've done and take their definition and move forward. I want to recognize how they came to this definition. It was through an advisory committee that was key stakeholders who actually had sites with functional and non-functional turf on them as legislated, that they had to put this committee together to define it. And so really it's an opportunity for us to leverage with the work they've done. And functional turf, the details of it, are really that it would provide recreational benefit to the community. It has specific square footage requirements at 1,500 continuous square feet or greater, more than 30 feet in all dimensions, located at least 10 feet from the street, not on a significant slope, and not within median strips along entryways to businesses, neighborhoods, etc. And so if this was something that the board wanted to direct staff to pursue, we wanted to talk a little bit also about implementation of what this might particularly possibly look like, recognizing that this is really a long-term measure. It wouldn't be part of our emergency or urgency ordinance that we've been passing or we've been utilizing for drought response. It would be more long-term. So we looked at applicability in the near term. We could incorporate this definition into new and rehabilitated landscapes within our current code, and then phase in the conversion of existing landscapes by an established date. So for example, Southern Nevada Water Authority has allowed for 6 years for full deployment, recognizing that those conversions do take time. As we continue to consider this, we would want to identify all the non-functional turf locations within the service area. This work is currently underway. Unfortunately, it was not ready for this evening, so I don't have a figure for us to contemplate, but we are collecting it and doing the analysis at this time. Hopefully in the next month or so, we should have that. We can continue offering incentives to expedite conversion for the existing sites. And then also we would want to provide direction and insight on appropriate replacement material. Another lesson learned that we could leverage from Southern Nevada Water Authority is that they really focused on replacing the area with trees, recognizing that the value that brings to the community. And so those sort of parameters could be included. Another area would be, oops, jumped ahead here. Another area would be looking at single-family residential landscape codes and potentially continuing to leverage the good work in Nevada. We could implement a no new turf could be installed in residential front yard restriction. We could limit side and backyards to up to 50% or some other percentage as we deem appropriate of the landscapable area. And then also use the limitations that have been put in place to no more than 5,000 square feet or no area less than 100, meaning you don't have to install turf, but if you do, you don't want to have a 50 square foot area. It just doesn't make sense. It's really difficult to irrigate such a small plot efficiently. Looking at implementation of a single family residential landscape code, it could be incorporated into our current water efficient landscaping, which is embedded within the district's water conservation code. And it would really focus on new and rehabilitated landscapes. Staff is not proposing putting a restriction on existing front yard lawns, but recognizing that for new connections and rehabilitated sites, it may make sense to pursue this path. And so with that, I'm hoping to get some feedback from the board on interest on either of these items, and then also just recognizing the water budget approach would be something we would continue to develop and consider. And so I'll stop there before I move on to the drought items.
Thanks, Carrie. And thanks to Peter. This was a fantastic presentation, and these are issues that we've been talking about here at the board for the last 6-8 months. So I'm really pleased to see these next steps being coming forward in this much more tangible way. I'll just say for myself, I'd like to see us move forward on all of them. And while I appreciate that Las Vegas has taken 6 years, I think their population, their service area is the Greater Valley. So I think they're about 2 million. So I would think we could move forward at considerably greater speed. But yeah, other than, that's a quibble. But I think all of these are options that we'd want to develop. But let's hear from other board members if you've got feedback on direction for Carrie and Ben on this.
I'll make it quick because I know it's late. I agree that we should develop these 3 things and continue to move forward.
Jack, Larry, do you guys want to weigh in? I just want to make sure the staff has clear direction from us.
Yeah, definitely. We need to know about it. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, as you know, I've been after water budgets forever. I mean, it's the logical approach. It's really the only way that the user can know what's to be expected of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can negotiate that and move forward.
Yeah.
So I'm all for it. I think because of the long-term value of this, it's really something that we have to push off for a bit now while we're fighting forest fires. I think it's a good planning tool, but it's a bit down the road for us at this point in time. While I'm
not sure I agree with you. To me, we can be putting in place an ordinance about non-functional turf, and I think we discussed.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
The idea of an ordinance limiting, a zero net water ordinance for new development. Maybe that's another thing. As long as you're doing this, I would add to this list. We have been talking about that now for 3 or 4 months. So I think that would be useful. And then at some point, I'm not sure when, but in addition to the folks that Peter has highlighted in his excellent presentation, we may want to have some of those folks come and speak to us. Maybe June Lopez from Molten Miguel. There's others from Southern California that have had really, strong experience with water budgets. I think it would be great for the board to hear from them.
Along that line, that's a very interesting thought. Obviously, much easier in the Zoom days than in non-Zoom days.
Right.
Just a quick question, Ben, a little off topic here, but are we going to live board meetings October 1st, or do we know?
The governor, I'll let Molly, because I'll butcher it.
To that, and we'll have an
We can do it
update.
at the end. I don't care. I just want to bring it up because it affects the things that Cynthia just said. Those should be added to this list. I was really referring to the water budgets as the more complicated one that needs to be looked at, but it's a bit down the road under the current situation.
So if I could kind of summarize this, my understanding from what I'm hearing is staff will work on the non-functional turf ordinance and bring a draft for discussion to the board at an upcoming meeting. On the restricting new and redone residential landscapes, we'll integrate that with the work we're doing on no net water for new connections, and we'll be bringing that back to an upcoming board meeting. Great. And on water budgets, we are working on those, and Carrie's getting the remainder of the survey on square footage for non-residential, and we're working in parallel on what water budgets would look like as a communication tool, as well as what they possibly may look like as part of a rate structure. Okay. So we're moving on all this.
Okay, good. Thank you for that useful feedback. I do have just a handful more slides around drought response. So we're wrapping up here. So additional potential prohibitions, really focusing one on winter irrigation and the other is pool filling. So starting with potential prohibition on winter irrigation. So the water use limits that were just adopted in the prior item exclude, as noted, commercial, institutional, and multifamily customers. But the intent of those are also to focus on irrigation use, right, and curbing irrigation. And so there's an opportunity for the district to provide consistency to all winter irrigation. And this would be done through a potentially through a prohibition on irrigation during the winter billing period for which is December through May for all of our customers. So it would transition from a 1 day a week to of spray and 2 days a week of drip down to 0, right? No irrigation. Spot watering would continue to be exempt. Following the winter irrigation season or the winter billing season, then we would revert back to the summer billing period. We would allow for irrigation based on the current restrictions, or can go back to the 1 day a week of overhead spray and 2 days a week of drip. Spot watering would be exempt. And so I want to pause here and see if there's interest in an item like this being developed for the board's future consideration.
Sorry, board comments? I mean, it all sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious that another half hour of presentations and it's almost 10 o'clock and I have a 7 o'clock presentation. So I'm not going to make it to the end of this meeting if we can't move along, guys.
Okay. The other item is sample prohibitions on pool filling. We've heard we pulled 2 models. One is Northern Water District, which we want to provide the language that they've adopted. So they have refilling a completely drained pool and or initial filling of a swimming pool based on a specific date is no longer prohibited. And they did want to recognize they gave their customers 70 days from when it was adopted to when it was actually that permit needed to be made. City of Healdsburg has a prohibition on emptying existing pools, and that any new pool that is installed in their service area or filled cannot be using the city's water. They do allow for topping off. And so these were just 2 models that, again, we wanted to, there's been interest or comments from the board to bring some of these items back, and we wanted to get them in front of you to determine whether or not there was interest across the board for consideration.
I think we're interested in everything that we can be doing to be conserving water. Are there board comments on this item? Okay.
No. All right. Very good. So I think we received the feedback that we were hoping for.
Okay. But now we do need to go to public comment on this item. Terry, do we have public comments?
I see 3 public comments. Thank you. Deli Woodring, then Frank Egger and Larry Minikes, please, in that order. Go ahead, Ms. Woodring.
Thank you. I'm done for right now.
Okay. Mr. Egger.
Thank you very much. Frank Egger, Fairfax. For the past 2 months, our 2-person household used 25½ gallons per person per day. We still have a couple of barrels of rainwater catch left, and we reuse our gray water. Sonoma County is using Caltrans type large roadway signs on wheels to alert their residents as to just how bad a shape they are in water-wise with the drought. Until Marin Water places a temporary moratorium on new hookups, folks will not take Marin Water as serious as they should. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Minikes, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very brief. First, I'd just like to acknowledge Peter's presentation. I thought that was excellent. I picked up a lot from that. I thought really presentation, and it's worth going back, frankly. I'd also like to mention element just briefly is environmentally sound practices is going on. Is if you're gonna race, what we've learned is so much confusion as to what to replace. And so we've worked together with all the experts around here to develop guidelines that are part of the countywide fire protection, which MMWD is also part of. And so we can offer guidance there, what people can replace lawns with. Thank you. That's all tonight.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers, Rick Adler, then Barbara Salzman, please. Mr. Adler.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to commend you, the board and the staff. I think you're all excellent, hardworking, sincere, honest, dedicated public servants, and I really appreciate that. I think you're doing a great job. Only problem is that's not good enough. The situation you're in requires you to be superheroes. And therefore, I like the idea, and I hate to tell you this, but maybe you guys really ought to meet once a week to get all this done. There's an awful lot to do. And also, the limits of conservation are that half the people are selfish and self-centered, and you're just not going to reach them. Therefore, you're going to have to find new sources of water. And I'll tell you all about the catching the fog with a stainless steel fence and solar distilled desalinization. And I thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Ms. Salzman?
Needless to say, I think you should do all of these things and do them quickly, and especially the pool ordinance, which I don't think surprises you. And I also had a comment about the grass. I don't know why they allow grass in between houses, and then they show a picture of really houses right up against each other. Why would you ever need to put grass in between houses that are, well, anywhere? Maybe, well, I don't think grass should go anywhere, but if you put it anywhere, at least in the back where kids can play on it or something, but on the side of the house. Anyway, please do all of these things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
The last three speakers, 8800, James Krajewski, and Baron Hamill, please. 8800.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Nancy Okada. I really don't know why you don't add to this list of all these concerns a moratorium on new hookups. On page 17 of the General Manager's report, it says that in August there were 3 new service connections installed, and there were 10 service upgrades, and total service upgrades this fiscal year apparently were 23. I don't know what that means. How much more water are those people using? So that really you should really put a moratorium on new service hookups, because they're also putting their straw in the tank and sucking up stuff while we're all trying to conserve. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krajewski, please.
Right. I just wanted to compliment the initial presenter on those slides because they provided data. And that's one of the things, specific data seem to be missing often from many of these proposals. For example, the swimming pool proposal that was up there. How many gallons are you actually going to save with all of that? That ought to be part of the decision-making process, but I suspect it won't be put in there if that comes up. So what I'm just trying to encourage is the district have available to the public easily findable data on the website about water usage. For example, that first slide that was up there showed perfectly this is where our water is going. Although I did have a question on that about the streams and so forth, what category that fit in. But that's the kind of data that I think are extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. And last speaker, Ms. Baron Hamill, please.
Thank you again. I'll make this very quick. I know how hard all of.
Oops. Ms. Hamill? Sorry.
Baron Hamill, Corte Madera. I want to thank you all for how hard you're working. I know how difficult this is and how challenging it is. You've got a big community to handle, and people can handle the truth, and they will respond. Based on my experience in communications, I understand that. When you use crisis communications approach, you tell them the problem, you tell them the solution, and you will see the results. So to President Kohler's comments about not being able to wait 5 months to see results, yes, you need to start the communications program that's not a soft touch, but is a direct approach telling people the truth. We will be out of water if. Thank you again for your help, your support, and your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further speakers.
Okay, Ben, do you feel that staff has direction on this item?
We do. Thank you, President Kohler.
Excellent. Okay, we are moving on to item 10. This is an action item. We are adopting a resolution authorizing commencement of proceedings in connection with the issuance of revenue bonds.
Yeah, President Kohler and directors, if it pleases you, we'll move quickly here. Just by way of introductions, we're joined tonight by Jim Gibbs from Sperry Capital and Brian Quintz also on the line here from Quinton Thimmig LLP to answer any questions that you might have. But it's pretty straightforward. Item 10 is really two resolutions that kick off the process for the emergency intertie project on the bridge. The first resolution is just commencement of proceedings. So that gives staff the authority to do all of those things that we need to move towards bonding in December is the target timeframe for that. And then the second resolution just gives us the authority to reimburse the district for funds that we spend in between now and when we actually sell the bonds. So it's expected that we'll be going into our reserves and capital funds for things like design and pre-construction costs. So that just allows us to recoup those. So this is not authority to sell the bonds. It's just the beginning of the process. And if we decide against the bond sale at any time between now and December, we can stop the process prior to the sale of the bonds. And you will see us coming back to the board in October. We're expected to come back on October 19th when we actually engage the underwriter for this process. And then there'll be some other board meetings that we'll have to come back for to get actual authority to sell the bonds in December. So that is item 10. If you have any questions?
Well, why don't you cover item 11 just in the interest of time, and maybe we can do one vote, or if that works, Molly.
Absolutely. So item 11 is just a follow-on to item 10. So item 10 gives us the resolutions authorizing the process. And then in order to go down that road to selling the bonds, there are some professional services that we need. So the first agreement in item 11 is with Quinton Thimmig for bond counsel and disclosure counsel. The services are expected to cost $167,500 between both. The disclosure counsel is $30,000, and then the remaining $137,500 was based on a $100 million bond issue. If it's smaller, that bond counsel fee is a graduated fee, and it's lesser. And then the other agreement is with Sperry Capital for the municipal advisor services, and that is for $70,000, and that's a to not exceed. And then the costs associated with all those, as is pointed out in your staff reports, will be paid from bond proceeds, assuming the bonds are issued.
So I have a comment and a sort of a condition for my vote. I think it does make sense to move forward with this, but as we've discussed many times over the last few years, I would be not comfortable moving forward with bonds that are limited to moving to the intertie. The intertie, there's a lot of good reasons for it. We've all discussed that. But to me, a large infrastructure project that is dependent on bringing in water from the Central Valley only makes sense if we're much more real than we have been about reuse, water use efficiency, and demand management. So I'm gonna need to have some assurance in the bond documents that some measure of those dollars are available to invest in, in consumer rebates, in reuse, in, the full range of all of the programs that we've been talking about here to bring our use down to a sustainable level. So, I'll have to, Molly will have to advise me about whether or not, that's a change that can be made in the resolution today. I haven't had an opportunity to dive into the details of these resolutions to see if moving forward as they're currently drafted would limit the use of these bonds exclusively to the intertie. If so, I'll have to vote against.
I can tell you, President, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I just want to say in item 10 in the resolution exhibit A, we did put a description of the projects, and it's one sentence, and it just say that the proceeds would be used for projects consisting of the emergency intertie project and other capital improvement projects for the district.
Okay. Is there going to be an opportunity before we commit to these bonds to be explicit about the use of some of these funds to invest in efficiency and reuse?
Well, I don't know specifically to those particular items, President Kohler, but there certainly will be other actions that will be necessary for the board to take. And I would think that those are discussions that could happen prior to the board taking
Right.
action
It's
to
just that
finally.
I know this is going to happen fast, and I've been in this situation before where, you know, you will get down the road and then I'm told, oh, we can't use the bond funds for those purposes. So it is going to be, my support for this project will be absolutely contingent on our creating the opportunity for these bond funds to be available for the investments we need to make, long-term investments in water use efficiency, in reuse, in stormwater capture, to justify the, you know, this intertype project. I don't think we can justify this project, you know, if we're going to continue to use water unsustainably in this district.
So I think what Molly said may make sense if it works for you. Given the sentences in there now, it doesn't preclude the use of the funds for other than this project. And assuming this was passed, Chuck, where's the next time we come to the board for action?
The next time that we have scheduled right now is October 19th when we engage the underwriter.
So at that point, President Kohler, we could bring clarity on what we're recommending to be included in this bond offering, if that would work for you.
Yeah, that would work for me. I know we were talking about bringing in Ed Harrington and a few other people. I know that was discussed like 5-6 months ago, so I don't know where we're at with that. But I do think it's very important for the board to hear about this option, to understand those options. And I'm not trying to hijack this project, but we cannot be in a situation where we are bonding exclusively for this kind of very, very expensive infrastructure while we're continuing to throw pennies at these other longer term investments that we need to be making.
I'll just echo, for sake of time, that I support Director Kohler's guidance on this, and I'm in the same spot. And I think that we need to be thoughtful that if we do secure these bonds and we find that we end up with a wet year, such that we stop and ask ourselves, is it necessary to keep moving forward? Do we have options to use these bonds to address other conservation and efficiency or other district infrastructure needs, things that we need to get done anyway that are also still really high priority? And it'd be interesting to understand what flexibility we will have and what we would want to have.
I think that's a very interesting comment. I'm not as optimistic as you appear to be, Monty, about a wet winter. But more importantly, if we change, I think it's essential that these bonds are callable. So that is something we can do to redirect the debt. If in the event we don't need it for some reason, we can pay it off. So that's something I would like to see, Chuck, in the underwriter side of this. I don't know the shortest you can call them, but I know there's a big difference between ones that are callable and ones that aren't. So I know we might pay a little interest penalty for that, but I think it's an important option.
Yeah, and call features are normally built into these, Director Russell, just to protect us, if nothing else, from interest rate risk.
It isn't so much the call feature, Chuck, it's the when the call can occur. Yep. That's the issue. If it's 25 years from now or 15 years from now, the hand is cast, the die is cast. So, yep. We're set with it. But if we could bring that up, if in the event something happens and we could bring that up closer, that would be helpful, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, with
public
those
comment,
I'm comfortable moving forward. Do we have any other
public comment?
You're getting ahead of me, Larry. I'm getting there.
Okay. Sorry. I thought you were ready to go for a motion, so I thought we better hear the public first.
For if there's any more board comment on this. Okay. Public comment on this item, Terry.
There are 3: Frank Egger, Ed Jamison, and Rick Adler, please. Mr. Egger.
Thank you. Frank Egger, speaking for the North Coast Rivers Alliance. This is a permanent intertie on the Richmond Santa Fe Bridge. There has been no California Environmental Quality Act compliance for this intertie. I've been waiting for scoping sessions or meetings for the intertie and nothing's been posted. Please put me on your CEQA notification list. fager@pacbell.net. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Will do, Frank. Thank you.
Mr. Jameson?
Hi, this is Ed Jameson, Larkspur. Any bonds that are issued should be for capital projects only. If you want to do a marketing program for further conservation efforts, that should be out of other operating funds. We have implemented a lot of conservation in this county already, and that's why you're only at 27% improvement compared to a 40% target. A bond issue should be to solve the problem with capital projects, not for further marketing issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Adler, please.
I again object to spending the money on and issuing the bonds and spending the money on an intertie to water that won't be there when we need it. And so I agree with President Kohler that if you can sell the bonds and that they can be used for other projects, for the bog catching fence and the solar distilled water, that would be okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Ben and the staff, because Mr. Adler's hung in here for this whole meeting and he's raised these issues a couple of times. Can I just request that staff follows up with him about these two issues? And also, Ben, do you want to provide just a 30-second explanation for why you have greater confidence that we will be able to purchase water on the spot market?
Sure. Purchasing water on the spot market, we're finding a very robust market. Water transfers that occur every year. We understand approximately, or maybe over 100 occur every year. And many agencies, increasing numbers, use water transfers as a way to augment their water supply. What I can say is I am not going to bring a project to the board for recommendation to move forward with it without complete confidence that we do have agreements in place and we will have water available to help us in this drought.
Thank you. One last speaker, 8800, please. Go ahead.
Hi, Nancy Okada. If, in fact, this permanent intertie is going over the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to connect to East Bay Mud's line, and East Bay Mud's line does not extend out to where it's supposed to go, to a huge development that's planned for Point Malati. In fact, tonight the Richmond Council is discussing that development in Point Malati. Then the East Bay Mud should be paying for the section that extends to meet the section that goes over Marin Side to the end of the Marin Side as Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. I would like to know how far we're going into Richmond in terms of extending this pipeline in order to get the water from the East Bay Mud is going to be carrying across its pipelines. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
All right. Are there any further board comments on this item? Okay. Seeing that there are not, I am looking now for a motion. Molly, do you want us to do these as two resolutions or one?
I think it's fine, President Kohler, unless there's a concern by one of the directors to move them collectively.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion to move them collectively unless there is objection.
What kind of language do we need? I'm ready to make the motion, Molly.
A motion to move the resolutions in item 10 as well as the approval authority in item 11.
A motion to approve the resolution as written, and a motion to approve the issuance of the two contracts to our bond consultants.
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call vote, please.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. This brings us to item 10, the request to fill a temporary meter reader position. Oh, and a repair worker position, so 2 positions. Oh, no, it's 1 position. Doing 2 things.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's one
One
position,
guy.
President Kohler.
One guy.
Yeah, we're actually asking to fill the temporary meter reader and repair worker 1 position. We have a vacancy. We were able to kind of stumble along without that for about the last year and a half, but and now with the drought and increase in work, and we have some pending retirements, we'd like to go ahead at this time and fill the position, and it is a budgeted position.
Okay. Any board comment on this item? Any public comment on this item, Terry?
There are none.
All righty, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
All right, we need a roll call vote.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. We are down to future agenda items because we cannot wait to come back and do this again.
Just before you, nothing has changed from when the staff report came out. You have the Finance and Administration Committee meeting this Thursday. We will be discussing the in-person meeting, so just letting you all know that. And also we'll have our next board meeting October 5th. And then a board retreat October 15th, and we're prepping for that. I will be okay.
I have a quick question. Director Russell brought up an idea of adding meetings, and I'm observing, mixed reactions to that. So I was interested in what the board would like in regards to that. I'm taking it, it's not just a no-brainer to do it and try it, but we'd be up for that. Or we could bring back an item to talk about ways to streamline the meeting. And, I'm sure staff does have some ideas. For example, approving budgeted positions is unusual. It wouldn't save a lot of time, but collectively, so maybe if it works for the board, we'd bring back an item on streamlining board meetings and just having a general discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I would be pretty uncomfortable adding even more meetings to the schedule. I mean, some of us work. We have to, I need some time to actually do my job. So, I just, it's a lot. So
we'll bring an item to have a discussion.
Okay. All right. There's no other business before the board. I think we are adjourned.
Well, actually, there is one public comment on this.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
No worries.
Done future agenda items. I'm sorry I missed that. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's the first time that I've seen the public comment items on this.
All right.
Deli Woodring, then Baron Hamill, please.
I'll be very quick. This is Deli Woodring. I remember several board meetings ago when we were talking about discussing a hookup moratorium when the acreage footage got down below 29,000 feet. And what I'm hearing tonight is that it's at 28,000 acre feet. And I'm wondering when we will have something on the agenda about a hookup moratorium. That is pretty important to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the reminder on that. We are going forward with a sort of a modification of that. The no net loss, the no new water. Sorry, it's very late and I'm very tired. The zero net water for new development, which is related. But I think, Ben, when you bring that back, we're going to have to talk about a hookup moratorium as well.
And the last speaker is Ms. Baron Hamill.
Just a very quick question. If you do go to live board meetings, would you still be making them available to the public via Zoom? Some people are still not going out, concerned about breakthrough cases, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know the answer.
That's going to be on the agenda for the Finance and Administration Committee meeting that's happening this Thursday. So we'll be able to address those issues.
Well, I think we should point out that it's really a function of the Brown Act. It's not something we really have control over, at least as I understand it. So it's a little out of our hands, more in the governor's hands.
Okay. Yes, we can talk about that and the new legislation that was just signed.
Okay, I really don't want to get us off on, this was not the agendized item that we're talking about right now. So I want to keep us to that. And I think we're done talking about future agenda items. So with that, I'm going to bid everybody good night. And like I say, we'll do it all again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Hey.